The stars belonged to the Zaldoran hegemony, and they had no intention of sharing. For 3,000 years, their warships had crossed the galaxy, bringing every new species under their control. Some joined willingly. Others fought and lost. The result was always the same. The hegemony grew larger, richer, and more powerful with each passing century. When humans first developed faster than light travel, the hegemony noticed immediately. Their scout ships watched Earth's clumsy first attempts at interstellar exploration with amusement. These newcomers seemed so young, so naive, so completely unprepared for the reality of galactic politics. The hegemony sent observers who reported back that humanity possessed nothing special. Their technology was adequate but unremarkable. Their military forces were scattered and poorly organized. They would be easy to control. The formal contact came on a Tuesday afternoon. A massive hegemony vessel appeared in orbit above Earth, broadcasting its message in 100 languages. The aliens offered protection, trade opportunities, and a place in the galactic community. All humanity had to do was accept hegemony authority, pay annual tribute, and follow the established rules. It sounded reasonable to some. To others, it sounded like a cage wrapped in pretty words. Ambassador Sarah Chun sat in the emergency session of Earth's United Defense Council. Around the table, representatives from every major nation debated the alien offer. Some argued for acceptance. The hegemony was vast and ancient. Resistance seemed foolish. But Chun remembered her history. She remembered every empire that had offered protection in exchange for submission. The price always went up. The freedoms always disappeared. "They're testing us," she said quietly. "If we accept now, we'll never be equals. We'll always be subjects, waiting for permission to live our own lives." The debate lasted for weeks. In the end, Earth's response was unanimous. Thank you, but no. Humanity would chart its own course among the stars. The hegemony council received the rejection with disbelief that quickly turned to anger. In their entire history, no species had refused their generous offer. It was insulting. It was dangerous. If humanity's defiance went unpunished, others might get similar ideas. The council voted to send a punitive fleet. Not their entire armada, of course. That would be overkill. Just 300 warships. More than enough to humble these arrogant newcomers. Admiral Verkesh commanded the fleet with confidence, bordering on boredom. He had conducted 17 of these enforcement actions in his career. They always followed the same pattern. The target species would see the overwhelming force arrayed against them, realize resistance was futile, and surrender. Occasionally, some hotheads would fire a few shots before giving up. It never mattered. Hegemony shields could withstand anything these primitive civilizations threw at them. He spent the 3-week journey to Sol System composing his victory report and planning the occupation. Earth had some interesting cultural artifacts. He might collect a few souvenirs. The humans would learn to respect their betters, and the galaxy would remember what happened to those who defied the hegemony. Meanwhile, on Earth and throughout the solar system, humanity prepared. The rejection of the hegemony's offer hadn't been impulsive. The Defense Council had known what it would mean. They had been preparing for this moment since the first alien scout ship appeared. Dr. Marcus Webb stood in the command center buried deep beneath the lunar surface. Around him, technicians monitored hundreds of screens showing weapon systems scattered across the asteroid belt. Hidden in orbit around Mars, disguised as mining equipment and communication satellites throughout the solar system. Humanity had spent every available resource building these defenses, and they'd done it in absolute secrecy. The aliens thought humans were primitive. They thought human technology was crude and unremarkable. They had no idea what humanity had actually accomplished in the desperate years of preparation. Webb smiled grimly. The hegemony was about to learn an important lesson about underestimating anyone. The alien armada entered the outer solar system right on schedule, their formation tight and confident. Vogrod broadcast his demands immediately. Surrender within 24 hours or face destruction. Simple, clean, standard. Procedure. Sarah-chan watched the broadcast from the Defense Council chamber. Her hands were steady, but her heart pounded. So many lives depended on what happened next. Not just human lives, but the lives of every species in the galaxy still suffering under hegemony control. If humanity succeeded here, it would prove that the old empire could be challenged. If they failed, Earth would burn. All stations report ready. Webb's voice came through the secure channel. Awaiting your order, Ambassador. Chun took a deep breath. Outside, the sun was setting over the Atlantic. She thought about her brother serving on one of the fighter squadrons, hidden on Mars. She thought about billions of people trusting their leaders to protect them. She thought about the future her species might have if they survived the next few hours. Do it, she said, across the solar system. Weapon systems that had been silent and dark suddenly came alive. Railgun accelerators that stretched for kilometers began spinning up. Targeting computers locked onto the alien fleet with precision the hegemony had never imagined possible. Fighter squadrons launched from hidden bases on Luna, Mars, and a dozen carefully prepared asteroid facilities thought the trap was set. And the hegemony had flown straight into it. The first projectile crossed the distance between the asteroid belt and the alien fleet in just under 3 seconds. It was a simple tungsten rod, nothing fancy, nothing complicated. Just dense metal accelerated to 95% of light speed. The hegemony shields, designed to dissipate energy from lasers and plasma weapons, didn't even slow it down. Admiral Verkesh's flagship shuddered as the rod punched through 2 decks before the kinetic energy released in a blast that looked like a small sun. Alarms screamed throughout the vessel. Verkesh stared at his tactical display in confusion. They hadn't detected any weapons fire. No energy signatures. Nothing. How had they been hit? The second projectile answered his question by erasing one of his escort cruisers from existence. Then the third, the fourth, the fifth. They came from everywhere and nowhere, too fast to track, too numerous to evade. The hegemony fleet, which had entered Sol System in perfect formation, scattered like fish fleeing a shark. Evasive maneuvers. Verkesh shouted, but his helmsman was already moving. The massive flagship turned with ponderous grace, its engines burning at maximum. Another impact rocked the vessel. More alarms. Half the command crew was dead or wounded. This wasn't supposed to happen. This couldn't be happening. Marcus Webb watched the battle unfold from his lunar command center with savage satisfaction. Years of planning, years of preparation, all coming together in perfect synchronization. The railgun platforms hidden throughout the asteroid belt fired in carefully calculated sequences, their projectiles tracking the alien ships with quantum-locked targeting systems. The hegemony had never encountered weapons like these because nobody else had thought to use them. Energy weapons were more elegant, more sophisticated. Kinetic weapons were brutal and primitive. Humanity had chosen brutal and primitive. And it was working. Launch all fighter squadrons, Webb ordered. Execute attack pattern Delta. From hidden bases on Luna and Mars, hundreds of small craft burst into space. The hegemony had seen human fighter designs during their surveillance. They had dismissed them as inefficient and dangerous. Too small for proper shielding. Too reliant on fragile biological pilots. In a straight fight between a hegemony cruiser and a human fighter, the cruiser would win every time. But humanity didn't fight straight fights. Lieutenant Commander Rachel Torres led Red Squadron through the chaos of the shattered alien formation. Her neural interface fed her more information than any biological mind should be able to process. But years of training had prepared her for this moment. She thought, and her fighter responded instantly. No delay between decision and action. Human and machine working as one. Red Squadron, target the cruiser at Mark 7, she transmitted. Hit and fade. Don't get cocky. The squadron swept in from 3 directions simultaneously. The hegemony cruiser tried to bring its main guns to bear, but the human fighters were already gone, leaving a spread of missiles in their wake. The missiles weren't powerful enough to destroy the cruiser, but they didn't need to be. They just needed to damage the shields and sensors. Blue Squadron followed 30 seconds later, targeting the same weakened areas. Then Gold Squadron. Then Silver. Wave after wave of precisely coordinated strikes. Each one planned to exploit the vulnerabilities the previous attack had created. The hegemony crew fought back desperately, but they were trained for fleet engagements. Not this swarm of stinging insects that refused to hold still. The cruiser's shields finally collapsed under the sustained assault. One last missile strike, and the vessel broke apart in a silent explosion that lit up the dark. Aboard his battered flagship, Vokesh finally understood what was happening. The humans weren't trying to match hegemony strength. They were using speed, stealth, and tactics the hegemony had never needed to develop. Every assumption about human capabilities had been wrong. Worse, the humans had studied the hegemony carefully. They knew exactly how hegemony ships fought, how their tactics worked, where their weaknesses were. "Signal the fleet," he said, his voice hollow. "Full retreat. Get us out of this system." His communications officer looked at him with wide eyes. "Admiral, the hegemony has never retreated from. Do it now." The remaining alien ships turned and burned for the outer system, their engines screaming. The human fighters pursued, harrying them every meter of the way. More railgun projectiles lanced through space, each one finding a target. By the time the shattered hegemony fleet reached the jump point and escaped into faster-than-light travel, they had lost over 2/3 of their vessels in the Defense Council chamber. Sarah Chun watched the tactical display as the last alien ship vanished from Sol System. Around her, people were crying, cheering, embracing. They had done it. Against impossible odds, humanity had won, but Chun didn't celebrate. She knew this was just the beginning. The hegemony would receive Urkesh's report. They would see what happened to their invincible fleet, and they would have to decide what to do about these upstart humans who refused to know their place. Marcus Webb appeared on the main screen, his face tired but triumphant. "Casualties are lighter than projected. We lost 47 fighters and 3,000 personnel across all platforms. But we took out 214 enemy vessels. The remaining ships are running. Prepare for the next wave," Chun said quietly. "They'll come back, probably with everything they have." Webb nodded. "We'll be ready." "But Sarah, we just proved something important today. We proved the hegemony can bleed." She looked at the faces around the room, young and old, from every nation, every culture, united by the simple desire to remain free. "Let's hope that's enough," she said. "Let's hope they're smart enough to realize what it means." The Grand Assembly Hall on Zolder Prime had stood for 2,000 years, its crystalline walls bearing witness to countless victories and the subjugation of hundreds of worlds. Now those walls echoed with something new. Fear. Admiral Verkesh stood before the council, his carapace still bearing scars from the Battle of Sol. His report had been delivered. The silence that followed felt heavier than the void of space. 300 ships sent to humble a primitive species. Barely 100 returned, most of them damaged beyond immediate repair. Councillor Drextar was the first to speak, his voice sharp with anger. "This is impossible. Our shields are impenetrable. Our weapons are superior. How could 300 warships lose to a species that only achieved faster-than-light travel 30 years ago? Burkesh's response was bitter. Because we assumed their technology would follow predictable patterns. We assumed they would fight the way everyone else fights. We were wrong on every count. He pulled up the tactical recordings, and the council watched in stunned silence as tungsten rods, traveling at near-light speed, tore through hegemony shields like they weren't there. They watched human fighters move with impossible coordination, executing attacks that required a level of pilot skill the hegemony had never seen. They watched their mighty fleet break and run. They turned their entire star system into a weapon, Burkesh continued. Every moon, every asteroid, every orbit hid surprises. And their pilots. He paused, struggling with the words. They link their minds directly to their machines. No computer intermediary. No safety protocols. They accept risks we would never consider. Counselor Drextar slammed his appendage against the table. Then we send a larger fleet. We mobilize everything we have and burn their world to ash. We cannot allow this defiance to stand. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The hegemony had maintained control through overwhelming force and the certainty of retaliation. If humanity's rebellion went unpunished, the entire empire might unravel. Species that have been subjects for centuries might start wondering if they too could fight back. But Elder Thesara, the oldest member of the council, raised a trembling appendage. The chamber fell silent. She had served for 300 years and had seen the hegemony through its greatest triumphs. Her voice, when she spoke, was soft but carried weight. I have reviewed all the recordings, she said, including the parts Admiral Burkesh did not include in his official report. A holographic display appeared above the council table. It showed a damaged hegemony cruiser, its crew evacuating in escape pods. 3 human fighters approached, and the hegemony survivors braced for death. Instead, the human ships escorted the pods to safety, protecting them from debris and guiding them to a neutral collection point. They fought with honor, Dexara continued. Even in the fury of battle, they preserved enemy lives when they could have simply destroyed them. When is the last time we showed such restraint? Drextar scoffed. Sentimentality won't rebuild our fleet or restore our authority. No, the elder agreed. But consider what we face. We can mobilize our full armada. Perhaps 10,000 ships. We can assault Earth and probably destroy it, though the cost will be horrific. Their weapons are primitive but effective. Our casualties would be immense. She let that sink in before continuing. And what then? Every ship we lose at Earth is a ship we can't use to maintain control elsewhere. We have reports that 17 subject species are already withholding tribute, claiming technical difficulties. They're testing us. If we throw our entire military at one stubborn world and emerge weakened, the whole empire could collapse. So we do nothing? Drextar demanded. We accept this humiliation? No. We do something we have not done in 3,000 years. Dexara stood, her old frame straightening with dignity. We offer them a place as equals. The chamber erupted in protest. Equals? The hegemony had no equals. The entire structure of their civilization was built on hierarchy and dominance. To offer humanity equal status would be to admit they couldn't be conquered. It would undermine everything. Dexara waited for the noise to subside. I have studied the historical records of every species we have subjugated. All of them were weaker than us. All of them eventually submitted because they had no choice. But humanity is different. They studied us for years before rejecting our offer. They prepared. They understood our strength and found a way to counter it. They are not stronger than us, but they are smart enough and determined enough to make conquest too costly. She pulled up images of Earth, cities gleaming under the sun, oceans and forests, billions of lives going about their business. We have a choice. We can attempt to destroy them and perhaps succeed at the cost of our empire's stability. Or we can acknowledge that the galaxy has room for more than one power. We can offer alliance instead of domination. They will see it as weakness, another counselor objected. Perhaps, Vexara acknowledged. Or perhaps they will see it as wisdom. I have watched the recordings of their ambassador, Sarah Chun. She did not want war. She simply refused to accept subjugation. There is a difference. The debate raged for hours, but eventually, pragmatism won over pride. The hegemony would send a diplomatic vessel to Earth, not as conquerors, but as equals. It left a bitter taste for many, but the alternative was worse thought as the council adjourned. Vexara stood alone in the empty chamber, looking at the stars through the crystalline walls. 3,000 years of expansion and dominance, now facing its first real challenge. She wondered if her people were capable of change. If they weren't, the future would be very dark indeed. 6 months after the Battle of Seoul, Earth's orbital space station hosted an event that would have seemed impossible just a year earlier. The hegemony diplomatic vessel approached slowly, its weapons powered down, broadcasting peaceful intentions on every frequency. On the station's main observation deck, Ambassador Sarah Chen waited with a delegation representing every major nation on Earth. She watched the alien ship dock and felt the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. 3,000 people had died defending humanity's independence, her own brother among them. The temptation to hold on to anger, to refuse any accommodation with the hegemony, was strong. But she remembered what they had fought for. Not revenge, not dominance, just the right to chart their own course. The airlock opened, and Elder Vexara entered, accompanied by a small retinue. The ancient alien moved slowly, but her bearing radiated dignity. She stopped before Chun and performed. A gesture that the human delegation had been briefed meant respect between equals. Chun returned the gesture. "Welcome to Earth, Elder. Your message requesting this meeting was unexpected, as was your species' defiance of our authority," Vexara replied. Her translator rendered her words in perfect English. "We have much to discuss." The negotiations took place over several weeks, broadcast live to both Earth and the hegemony worlds. Vexara opened with something unprecedented in hegemony history, an acknowledgement of wrongdoing. "We approached your world with arrogance. We assumed you would accept our authority because all others had. We sent warships when we should have sent diplomats. For this, I apologize on behalf of the Hegemony Council." The words caused shockwaves across the galaxy. Species that had been hegemony subjects for centuries watched in disbelief. Their masters apologizing? Admitting error? It was unthinkable. Chun's response was equally unexpected. "We accept your apology, Elder, but we must be clear. Earth will never accept tributary status. We will not pay tribute or submit to hegemony authority." "If that's the price of peace, these negotiations are over." "It is not," Vexara said quickly. "We propose something different. Full membership in the Galactic Assembly with voting rights equal to any hegemony world. Trade agreements based on mutual benefit, not extraction. And military cooperation against external threats, not occupation." The human delegation exchanged glances. Marcus Webb, now serving as military advisor, spoke up. "And what about the other species under hegemony control? Do they receive the same offer?" Vexara's expression was unreadable. "That will be for the Assembly to decide. But humanity has proven that the old ways cannot continue. Your victory has already inspired 17 worlds to demand renegotiation of their tributary agreements. The question is not whether change will come, but whether it will come peacefully or through more bloodshed." Over the following weeks, the framework of a new galactic order began to take shape. The treaty wouldn't be easy. There were hardliners on both sides who wanted continued confrontation. Some hegemony counselors still called for Earth's destruction. Some human factions wanted to press their advantage and demand hegemony surrender, but Chen and Dexara found common ground in pragmatism. Neither species would benefit from total war. The resources spent building weapons could instead build prosperity. The lives lost in battle could instead work toward a better future. It wasn't idealistic. It was simply logical. The final treaty signing took place in the same observation deck where the first meeting had occurred. As Chen added her signature to the document, she thought about her brother and all the others who had given their lives. They had fought for humanity's right to exist as free people. This treaty honored that sacrifice by ensuring the fight wouldn't need to continue. Outside, the first joint human hegemony patrol vessels were already forming up. Earth's defense platforms remained operational, a constant reminder that humanity's willingness to defend itself hadn't diminished. But now those same platforms protected both human and hegemony shipping lanes. Lieutenant Commander Rachel Torres led her squadron alongside a group of hegemony fighters on a training exercise. The alien pilots flew with technical precision but lacked the creativity and improvisation that made human tactics so effective. She opened a channel to her hegemony counterpart. Your formation is too rigid. If you encounter pirates or raiders, they'll exploit those gaps. The alien pilot's response was stiff. This is how we have always flown. Yeah, and my people kicked your ass because of it. She said it without malice, just stating fact. Want to learn something new? There was a pause then. Show us. It was a small moment, but it represented something larger. Two species that had been enemies learning to work together. It wouldn't be easy. Old prejudices and resentments would take generations to fade. But it was possible. On Earth, memorial gardens were planted in every major city, each tree representing someone lost in the Battle of Seoul. Sarah Chun stood in the Washington Memorial, looking at the young oak planted for her brother. His name was carved on a plaque, Lieutenant Michael Chun, Fighter Squadron Gold 7. She placed her hand on the rough bark. We did it, Mike, she whispered. Not the way any of us expected, but we did it. Humanity is free. And maybe, just maybe, we help free the galaxy too. News of the treaty spread across hundreds of worlds. Species that had lived under hegemony dominance for centuries began demanding similar terms. The empire that had ruled through force for 3,000 years found itself transforming into something new. A genuine coalition of independent worlds working together. It wasn't perfect. There were setbacks and conflicts. Some hegemony worlds refused to accept the changes and had to be brought in line by their own people. Some human colonies chafed at any cooperation with former enemies. But the overall trend was clear. The galaxy was evolving. Marcus Webb retired from active military service and took a position as an instructor, teaching the next generation of human and alien officers. On the first day of his joint species tactical class, he looked at the mixed group of students and smiled. You're here because the old ways didn't work. Because my people proved that arrogance and assumptions get you killed. I'm going to teach you how to think like humans. How to improvise, adapt, and overcome. Some of you won't like it. Tough. You're here to learn, not to be comfortable. As the years passed, humanity's influence on galactic culture grew. The rigid hierarchies of the hegemony softened. Species that had been enemies learned to work together. Trade flourished. Art and ideas flowed freely between worlds. And in quiet moments, people looked up at the stars and remembered the day everything changed. The day humanity unleashed a devastating strike that forced an ancient empire to reconsider its existence. The day the galaxy learned that freedom was worth fighting for, and that underestimating anyone was a fatal mistake. The future was uncertain, as it always was. But for the first time in 3,000 years, it was a future built on cooperation rather than domination. And that made all the difference.